Hello to all dear students. In this video, we'll be discussing about serotonin. So, serotonin is also known as 5-hydroxytryptamine. It is abbreviated as 5-HT. About 90% of serotonin is found in the gut, and the rest, that is 10%, is found in platelets as well as in the brain. It is also found in the scorpion sting, and it is widely distributed in invertebrates as well as in plants such as banana plant, pear plant, pineapple, tomato plant. In these plants also serotonin is present apart from human body. Next, suppose this is your blood vessel and this is a blood clot. A substance is released from the blood clot into the serum, and as soon as this substance is released into the serum, it will lead to vasoconstriction. Later on, we found that this substance is nothing but serotonin. So, by this, you got to know one function of serotonin, that is to produce vasoconstriction. Okay, so from the blood clot, serotonin is released into the serum, and whenever it is released into the serum, it will produce vasoconstriction. Next, suppose this is your gastrointestinal tract. A substance is released from the enterochromaffin cells, and this substance is nothing but your enteramine. Okay, so enteramine is released from the enterochromaffin cells of your gastrointestinal tract, and it mainly causes contraction of the smooth muscle of your gastrointestinal tract. Later on, we found that enteramine is nothing but your serotonin. Okay, so serotonin is mainly released from the enterochromaffin cells of your gastrointestinal tract, and it causes stimulation of your smooth muscle. Previously, we thought that this substance might be enteramine, but later on we found that this enteramine is nothing but serotonin only. Okay, so at this point, you understood there are two role of serotonin. First role is to produce vasoconstriction, and second role is to cause stimulation of your smooth muscle of gastrointestinal tract. Stimulation is nothing but contraction or increase of peristaltic movement. Fine. Next, we'll check out the structure of your serotonin. Now you know what is this ring. This structure is a indole. Now on the pentagon ring will have an alpha position and a beta position. On the beta position, we have a methyl, another methyl, and a amino group. So CH2, CH2, NH2 is nothing but amino ethyl. Now, what is the location of this amino ethyl? On the beta position. So we say it as beta amino ethyl indole. Next, the hexagon ring that you can see will have numbering to it. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. On the fifth position, we need to add OH group. So we call it as 5-hydroxy. So this is the structure of your serotonin. Chemically, it is beta amino ethyl 5-hydroxy indole, also known as 5-hydroxytryptamine. Okay, so this is the structure of your serotonin, also known as 5-hydroxytryptamine, also known as 5-HT, or also known as beta amino ethyl 5-hydroxy indole. Next, we'll check out the synthesis of serotonin. Suppose this neuron is nothing but your serotogenic neuron. Like we have got cholinergic neuron, adrenergic neuron, histaminergic neuron. Similarly, we have got serotogenic neuron. Serotogenic neuron means synthesis, storage, and release of serotonin takes place in such a neuron. And the main area exactly where the synthesis, storage, and release of serotonin takes place is the nerve ending of the neuron. So we'll zoom up this nerve ending and we'll check what all steps are involved in the synthesis and then storage and release of serotonin. So this is a nerve ending of serotogenic neuron. So for the synthesis of serotonin, we require an amino acid, and that amino acid is nothing but tryptophan. So tryptophan move inside this nerve ending. This is the structure of tryptophan. Okay, so this is the structure of tryptophan, and just compare it with serotonin. So serotonin and tryptophan structures are almost similar except two differences. First difference is on the fifth position we need to add OH group, and second difference is we need to remove this COOH. Okay, so from the tryptophan if you add OH group and remove COOH, then it will look similar to that of serotonin, and accordingly we should plan the synthesis. Means not we should plan, but already it has been planned inside our body. So just two changes, one OH group you need to add and one COOH you need to remove, and accordingly the synthesis also take place. Okay, so tryptophan moves inside the serotogenic nerve ending, and in the nerve ending it meets with an enzyme, and this enzyme is nothing but hydroxylase. So what do we expect what this hydroxylase will do? Yes, to this tryptophan on the fifth position it will add OH group, and this was what we want. So now tryptophan is converted into 5-hydroxytryptophan. Okay, same tryptophan, but at the fifth position there is hydroxyl group, so we call it as 5-hydroxytryptophan. Similarly in the nerve ending also tryptophan gets converted into 5-hydroxytryptophan. Next, this 5-hydroxytryptophan it meets with an another enzyme, red color enzyme. And what is this red colored enzyme? This is nothing but decarboxylase, and this is also what we wanted. So what is decarboxylase will do? It will cause removal of CO2, so that 5-hydroxytryptophan finally gets converted into 5-hydroxytryptamine. So this is nothing but your serotonin. Okay, so for the synthesis of serotonin we want two enzymes, and it is a two-step process. Firstly, initially what happens, tryptophan moves inside into the nerve ending of the serotonin, and it meets with an enzyme hydroxylase, and then this hydroxylase will convert tryptophan into 5-hydroxytryptophan. Next, this 5-hydroxytryptophan meets with another enzyme, that is a decarboxylase, and this decarboxylase will remove COO, so that 5-hydroxytryptophan is get converted into 5-hydroxytryptamine. So this is about the synthesis of 5-hydroxytryptamine. But our work is not completed yet. We have synthesized. Our another step should be storage. You know why storage is so much important? Because in the nerve ending there is an enzyme. The name of this enzyme is MAO, that is monoamino oxidase enzyme. And what this enzyme will do? It will destroy 5-hydroxytryptamine. We'll check out what happened. So this monoamino oxidase, the name only says monoamino oxidase, it will cause oxidation of the monoamine, and it remove the amino group, it destroy the amino group, and because of which this 5-hydroxytryptamine will convert it into a compound 5-hydroxyindole acetic acid. But we do not want 5-hydroxyindole acetic acid, we want 5-hydroxytryptamine. Okay, so in this destruction is mainly done by the enzyme monoamino oxidase. So to protect our 5-hydroxytryptamine by the attack of monoamino oxidase, what we need to do? We need to give protection to this 5-hydroxytryptamine. So what kind of protection means? We need to transfer this serotonin inside a vesicle. So for transferring this compound into the vesicle, we want a transporter, and the name of this transporter is VMAT2, that is vesicle monoamine transporter 2. Via this transporter, the serotonin compound is moved inside the vesicle. Okay, so this stars, you just assume this stars is nothing but your serotonin. Similar kind of transporter is also found in the platelets. So by this we got to know that platelets is also the area where storage of serotonin is been taking place. May not synthesis, but storage of serotonin takes place inside the platelets. Okay, so this is about the storage. Okay, so why we need to store this serotonin inside the vesicle? Because to protect it from the monoamino oxidase, and for storage we require a transporter, that is VMAT2 transporter. And this VMAT2 is not only present inside your the neuronal vesicle, but it is also present inside the platelets also. So serotonin is not only stored inside the vesicles of the neuron, but it is also present inside the platelets. Okay, so this is regarding the storage. Next we'll check out the release. So for release, it takes place in exactly same manner how other neurotransmitters are being released. So suppose this serotogenic neuron is under resting condition. So at resting condition, this neuron is having a resting membrane potential of minus 70 millivolt. Now suppose threshold potential is minus 60 millivolt, and little bit this neuron is getting stimulated, so that resting membrane potential has been moved to threshold potential, and once threshold potential is been attained, then threshold potential sensitive voltage gated sodium channel opens up, causing massive influx of sodium ion, so that the negative polarity is moved to positive polarity. So from minus 60 millivolt, the polarity has been changed to plus 10 millivolt. So you can say there is changes in the charges. This condition is known as depolarization, and once depolarization occurs, this voltage gated sodium channel will be closed, and two important channel, that is calcium channel and potassium channel, will be opened up. Via calcium channel, calcium ion moves inside, and via potassium channel, potassium ion moves outside. So for a brief duration of time, positive charges move inside and positive charges moves outside. So the net effect is, okay, we are watching the influx of calcium ion because there is a role of calcium ion. I am not showing outflux of potassium ion. Potassium ion is also moving outside, but I am not showing over here. Okay, so for a brief duration of time, calcium ion is moving outside and potassium ion is moving outside. So for this reason, there is a plateau attained. But after some times, this calcium channel also closes off, and only potassium channel is opens up. It's remained open, because of which outflux of potassium ion takes place, loss of cation, because of which the polarity moves back to minus 70 millivolt, and this condition is known as repolarization. So we know action potential, which is nothing but depolarization followed by repolarization. But when this action potential was been taking place, we saw few calcium ion moved inside. Influx of calcium ion took place. So what this calcium ion will do? This calcium ion is responsible for the fusion of the vesicular membrane protein with the axonal membrane protein. Okay, both the membrane fuses up and it opens up, causing exocytosis. So this is how release of serotonin will be taking place. Okay, so calcium ion has got a great role to be played over here. This calcium ion causes fusion of the vesicular membrane with the axonal membrane, and because of which serotonin will be removed, or it is be released by exocytosis. So this is about the release. Now after getting released, what will happen? We know serotonin will bind with its receptor to produce action. But suppose after getting released, still it has not acted upon its receptor, and it is just released out and it has not produced any kind of action. So what happened when it is not approaching to its receptor? We have got another mechanism. There is a transporter present on the nerve ending of the serotogenic neuron only, and this transporter is known as serotonin transporter. So what this serotonin transporter will do? It will transport the serotonin back inside its neuron. So this phenomena is known as reuptake. Means the role of this serotogenic neuron is not only to synthesize, store and release, and its work is done. No, when serotonin has not acted upon its receptor, then the role of this neuron, this serotogenic neuron, is to again reuptake this serotonin inside its neuron, and this condition is known as reuptake. And after getting reuptake, again this via this VMAT transporter, it is moved inside the vesicle so as to protect the serotonin from the monoamino oxidase enzyme. So this is about the synthesis, storage, release, destruction and reuptake of this serotonin. Next we'll talk about the receptors of your serotonin. So we have got 5-HT1 receptor, 5-HT2 receptor, 5-HT3 receptor, 5-HT4 to 7 receptors. So total 7 receptors, and even there are many subtypes. We have got nearly 14 receptor subtypes so far recognized. Next, this 5-HT1, 5-HT2 and 5-HT4 to 7, all the serotonin receptor except 5-HT3 receptor. These are G protein coupled receptors. Okay, so all the serotonic receptor except 5-HT3 receptor are a kind of G protein coupled receptor. In that 5-HT1 is a kind of G inhibitory kind of G protein coupled receptor. That means it is causing reduction in the availability of cyclic AMP. 5-HT2 is a kind of GQ type of G protein coupled receptor, which is nothing but your IP3 DAG pathway. And 5-HT4 to 7 is a kind of GS, that is G stimulatory kind of G protein coupled receptor, means it is involved in increase in the synthesis of cyclic AMP. And left behind is the 5-HT3 receptor. It is a kind of ion channel receptor. Okay, it is a kind of transmembrane ion channel receptor. So these are the receptors of your serotonin. Now we'll check out these receptors one by one. Not much study has been done regarding these receptor. We have got 7 serotogenic receptor, but among these 7, just first 4, that is 5-HT1, 5-HT2, 5-HT3 and 5-HT4 is been studied so far. We don't have any information regarding 5-HT5, 5-HT6 and 5-HT7 receptor. So in this video we will be discussing about the first 4 serotogenic receptors only. So now starting with 5-HT1 receptor. So this 5-HT receptor, as we know, it is a kind of G protein coupled receptor, which is a kind of GI, that is G inhibitory kind of G protein coupled receptor, and it acts by decreasing the level of cyclic AMP. This all things we know. We have got 6 subtypes of 5-HT1 receptor, and they are 5-HT1A, 5-HT1B, 5-HT1D, 5-HT1E, 5-HT1F and 5-HT1P. Okay, so these are the 6 subtypes of 5-HT1 receptor. Previously we had 5-HT1C receptor also, but now 5-HT1C is designated as 5-HT2C receptors. Probably because of its mechanism of action, it may not be GI, it may be GQ type of G protein coupled receptor. So 5-HT1C is no more 5-HT1C, now it is under the category of 5-HT2C. So we have got 6 subtypes of 5-HT1 receptor. Now quickly we'll check out the location of these 6 receptors. 5-HT1A is present in the raphe nucleus and in the hippocampus. 5-HT1B is present in substantia nigra, globus pallidus and basal ganglion. 5-HT1D is present in some area in brain. 5-HT1E is present in cortex and putamen. 5-HT1F is present in cortex and hippocampus, and lastly 5-HT1P is present in the enteric nervous system. So this is regarding the location of your 5-HT1 receptor. Next little bit we'll talk about 5-HT1A receptor. So whenever this 5-HT1A receptor gets activated, it has produced anti-anxiety action. So activation of 5-HT1A receptor will reduce the anxiety of a person who is actually suffering from anxiety. So similarly we have got a agonist of this 5-HT1A receptor, that is your buspirone. So what is buspirone? Buspirone is an anti-anxiety drug. And what is the mechanism of action of buspirone? The buspirone mainly acts by causing activation of 5-HT1A receptor. So whenever serotonin binds with 5-HT1A receptor, it has got anti-anxiety action, and an analogous of it is buspirone. Buspirone is 5-HT1A receptor agonist, which is also producing activation of this receptor, thereby used in the treatment of anxiety. Next, 5-HT1B receptor. You check out the location of 5-HT1B receptor: substantia nigra, globus pallidus, basal ganglion. So by location we can get an idea that it has got some role in Parkinson's disease. Next, 5-HT1B1D receptor. So this receptor is mainly present in the blood vessels, and more importantly it is present in the cranial blood vessels. And whenever 5-HT1B1D receptor of the cranial blood vessels gets activated, it is producing vasoconstriction, and this vasoconstriction action of this particular receptor is mainly used in the treatment of migraine. Next, we'll have few words regarding migraine. So, what is migraine? Migraine is a mysterious disorder characterized by pulsating headache, usually restricted to one side, which comes in attacks lasting 4 to 48 hours and is often associated with nausea, vomiting, sensitivity to light and sound, flashes of light, vertigo, loose motions, and other symptoms. So migraine attack, we know it is a very common thing. There is a headache, that is one sided headache with other symptoms. It may last from 4 to 48 hours. Next, we have got two major types of migraine. First one is migraine with aura and another one is migraine without aura. What is aura? Migraine with aura is also known as classical migraine, in which headache is preceded by visual or other neurological symptoms. Whereas the second type, the migraine without aura, is a common migraine. So, what is this aura? See, in general, in a common language, if I'll say regarding this aura, means, in few films, in television, it is been showing now some person who has lost his memory, and some flashes of previous memory will come with headache, or there are some concept of rebirth, पुनर्जन्म, and पिछले जन्म की यादें आ जाती है सर दर्द के साथ. So that kind be aura. So migraine with aura means some flashes of previous thing, or some images will be seen in this aura. So that is migraine with aura, also known as classical migraine. And the second type is migraine without aura. So this pulsating headache is very much important over here. So why this pulsating headache will be taking place, we'll check out. So pulsating dilation of certain large cranial vessels is the immediate cause of pain. Okay, so pulsating dilation, this pulsating headache occurs because of vasodilation of cranial blood vessels. The pathogenic mechanisms are not well understood. We have got two theories, vascular theory and neurogenic theory. The vascular theory holds that initial vasoconstriction or shunting of blood through carotid arteriovenous anastomosis produces cerebral ischemia and starts the attack, whereas the neurogenic theory considers it to be a spreading depression of cortical electrical activity followed by vascular phenomena. So we do not know the exact reason. We have got certain theory, we have got certain assumptions. Theory is nothing but assumptions. Next, suppose this is a blood vessel, and what blood vessel it is? This is the cranial blood vessel, and as you can see how this cranial blood vessel is, it is dilated. Okay, so whenever dilation of cranial blood vessel occurs, it may cause migraine. So how to treat this migraine? Very simple, you just constrict this blood vessel and the migraine will be treated. Okay, so what we got to know, migraine mainly occurs because of dilation of the cranial blood vessel, and if we constrict this cranial blood vessel, it will treat migraine. So on this cranial blood vessel, we have got a receptor, and what is this receptor? This is 5-HT1B1D receptor. Whenever serotonin or any other agonist of this receptor act on it, this receptor gets activated and it will produce vasoconstriction and thereby treat migraine. So we have got 5-HT1B1D receptor agonists such as naratriptan, sumatriptan, alitryptin, rizatriptan, frovatriptan, as well as we have got ergot alkaloids. So we have got two types of drugs, triptans and another one is ergot alkaloids. So what these drugs will do? These drugs will cause activation of 5-HT1B1D receptor, because of which vasoconstriction of this cranial blood vessel takes place and thereby migraine will get treated up. Now we have got trigeminal neuron. From this trigeminal neuron, a peptide neurotransmitter is released, which is calcitonin gene related peptide, CGRP. Okay, it is a peptide neurotransmitter which is released from trigeminal neuron. And what is the action of this CGRP? Yes, it is a very powerful vasodilator, and secondly it produces neurogenic inflammation. And now we got to know that vasodilation will cause, means vasodilation of particularly cranial blood vessel will cause migraine plus neurogenic inflammation. Neurogenic inflammation is nothing but it is also producing a vasodilation kind of condition. So in total, you just understand that this CGRP is also responsible for producing migraine. Why migraine is produced? Migraine is produced because of vasodilation. So directly it is producing vasodilation, plus it is also producing neurogenic inflammation. And what happens in inflammation? In inflammation, vasodilation only occurs, isn't it? Now we know that on the blood vessel we have got 5-HT1B1D receptor. Even this trigeminal neuron have got 5-HT1B1D receptor also. So we know that serotonin binds with the 5-HT1B1D receptor of the cranial blood vessels and produce vasoconstriction. Similarly, serotonin can also bind with this trigeminal neuron and cause activation of this 5-HT1B1D receptor. When the 5-HT1B1D receptor of this trigeminal neuron gets activated, the result is it will reduce the release of this CGRP. When this CGRP release is inhibited, there will be reduction in the vasodilation action, even there will be reduction in the neurogenic inflammation. So we have got same drugs, that is 5-HT1B1D receptor agonist, same triptans as well as ergot alkaloid. So this triptans and ergot alkaloid can treat migraine in two ways. First is direct way and another one is indirect way. Direct way means directly it will act on the 5-HT1B1D receptor of the blood vessel and produce vasoconstriction. This is the direct way by which these triptans and ergot alkaloids will treat migraine. Indirect way of treating migraine is by activating the receptor present on the trigeminal neuron, because of which CGRP will be reduced and thereby there will be reduction in the vasodilation as well as reduction in the neurogenic inflammation. So this is the indirect way by which migraine will be treated. Next, drug therapy for migraine has to be individualized. Next, for severity and frequency of attacks and response of individual patients to a drug used earlier determine the choice. Like accordingly, we have got depending upon severity, we have got three types of migraine. They are mild migraine, moderate migraine, and severe migraine. And accordingly, we should give the medications. So I'll check out these one by one. First of all, coming to mild migraine. So mild migraine means cases having fewer than one attack per month of throbbing but tolerable headache lasting up to 6 hours and which does not incapacitate the individual may be classified as mild migraine. So drug therapy we are giving is, first of all, initially we should start with simple analgesics like paracetamol or aspirin taken at the first indication of an attack and repeated 4 to 6 hourly abort and suppress most mild attacks. If this also does not work, next thing we need to do is we need to use NSAIDs, that is non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs and their combinations. So drugs like ibuprofen, naproxen, diclofenac, mefenamic acid, indomethacin, either alone or combined with these previous simple analgesics like paracetamol, codeine or diazepam or another sedatives or diphenhydramine or another antihistaminics or caffeine are found more satisfactory by some patients. Okay, so whenever mild migraine occurs, we should initiate with simple analgesic. If this does not work, then we should give non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug, single drug. If that does not work, we should give a combination of this NSAIDs. Afterwards, Antiemetics. Antiemetics are very much important. So we are giving drugs such as metoclopramide. It is frequently used that relieves nausea, vomiting, and gastric statures. Next, we can use domperidone and even prochlorperazine. Even this diphenhydramine is often used as it is having both sedative as well as antiemetic action. So this is about mild migraine. Next, for moderate migraine. Moderate migraine means migraine may be labeled as moderate when the throbbing headache is more intense, lasts for 6 to 24 hours, nausea or vomiting and other features are more prominent, and the patient is functionally impaired. One or more attacks occur per month. Okay, so in mild migraine, what happened? Just fewer than one attack occurred 1 month, and that headache will be just for 8 hours. But in moderate migraine, more than one attacks in a month, and that is more intense headache, and it lasts for 6 to 24 hours. That is considered as moderate migraine. So we'll check out the drug therapy. Simple analgesics are usually not effective, so we should never opt for simple analgesic. We should directly go for NSAIDs. So stronger NSAIDs or other combinations as mentioned in mild migraine treatment are beneficiary in many cases. Okay, so we should, means whenever moderate migraine is there, we should start from non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. Like in mild migraine, we initiated from simple analgesics and then we increase the level of the medication. Similarly, in moderate migraine, simple analgesics does not work. So we should start from non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. So drugs such as ibuprofen, naproxen, diclofenac, indomethacin, mefenamic acid, and so on and so forth should be opted either single or in combination we should give. Next, the remaining are treated with a specific anti-migraine drug, that is a triptan or an ergot preparation. Okay, so we should start with non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug, and along with it, in combination to it, we should also opt for triptans or ergot preparation for the treatment of migraine. So these drugs are more effective in migraine without aura, but certain patients of migraine with aura also prefer them over ergot alkaloids. Drugs are taken only till the attack passes off. In addition to that, antiemetics are most regularly needed. Next, lastly, talking about severe migraine. So these patients suffer 2 to 3 or more attacks per month of severe throbbing headache lasting 12 to 48 hours, often accompanied by vertigo, vomiting and other symptoms. The subject is grossly incapacitated during the attack. And for treatment, we should offer analgesics or NSAIDs, and their combination usually do not afford adequate relief. So specific drugs like triptans or ergot alkaloids have to be preferred along with antiemetics. Okay, so for severe attack, simple analgesics was useless. For moderate only, how could it work on severe migraine? Even NSAIDs will not help that much. So directly we should opt for triptans or ergot alkaloids. Another thing is prophylactic regimens lasting 6 months or more are usually recommended. So we'll check out the prophylaxis for migraine. So for this prophylaxis of migraine, the drugs you can remember by the mnemonic A, B, C migraine. So A for antidepressants such as amitriptyline, imipramine or any other tricyclic antidepressant can be used as a prophylaxis. And another A is for anti-epileptics such as valproate and topiramate can be used for prophylaxis of migraine. Next, B for beta blockers such as propranolol are widely used for the prophylaxis. Another B is for botulinum toxins. So botulinum toxins, what we do, this botulinum toxin injection will have on the forehead directly, and it will produce some relief by relieving the vasodilation, means it will produce vasoconstriction obviously. So if no other drug works, then we can use in that case botulinum toxin. Next, C is for calcium channel blockers such as flunarizine is widely used for the prophylaxis. And another C is CGPR antagonist. CGPR is the main villain. CGPR, it is directly producing vasodilation, plus it is producing neurogenic inflammation, because of which migraine is occurring. So we have got monoclonal antibodies against this CGPR, which is arinumab, fremanezumab and galcanezumab. So these drugs can be used for prophylaxis. And lastly, M is for methysergide. It is an ergot alkaloid which is no more used now, but it was used as a prophylaxis for the no, for migraine. So these drugs can be used for the prophylaxis of migraine. Now we know that trigeminal neuron, from the trigeminal neuron a peptide neurotransmitter, that is calcitonin gene related peptide, is been released. This thing we know. And even we know the actions of the CGRP, that is it causes powerful vasodilation, plus it is a producing neurogenic inflammation. This thing we all know. And we know that on the blood vessels, this even on the trigeminal neuron as well as on the blood vessels, we have got 5-HT1B 1D receptors, and activation of these receptors will treat the migraine. So we have got, means whenever serotonin binds with it, it will treat the thing. And we have got triptans as well as ergot alkaloids, which has nothing but the agonist of these receptors, by which the migraine will get treated. So these triptans have got direct action as well as indirect action for treating migraine. Direct action means it will directly act on the blood vessels, causing vasoconstriction for treating migraine. Indirect action means it will act on the trigeminal neuron and it will reduce the CGRP peptide and thereby treat migraine. So direct action is directly acting on the blood vessel. Indirect action for treatment of migraine is acting on the trigeminal neuron. But you know what happens? There is a side effect. Whenever triptans have got direct action, means whenever it act on the blood vessel producing vasoconstriction, it have got a side effect of coronary artery spasm, and we do not want this problem. Means if you are treating migraine but you are ending up with coronary artery spasm, we do not want this thing. So what happened, trigeminal neuron have got one more receptor, and this receptor is 5-HT1F receptor. And whenever serotonin binds with 5-HT1F receptor, it has got action on the trigeminal neuron only. We do not have 5-HT1F receptor on the blood vessel. We have got 5-HT1F receptor on the trigeminal neuron only. And whenever this 5-HT1F receptor gets activated, its action is to reduce the level of CGRP. When CGRP level is reduced, there will be reduction in the vasodilation as well as reduction in the neurogenic inflammation. So when you are activating 5-HT1F receptor, it does not have any direct action. So if there is no direct action, there is no problem of coronary artery spasm. So this is a better way for treating migraine. So we have got a 5-HT1F receptor agonist, and the name is lasmiditan. So this is all about the treatment of migraine. Next we'll move to 5-HT2 receptor. So 5-HT2 receptor, it is it is also kind of G protein coupled receptor, and we have got three subtypes of this 5-HT2 receptor. They are 5-HT2A, 5-HT2B and 5-HT2C receptors. 5-HT2A receptor is found in the vascular smooth muscle. Vascular smooth muscle means smooth muscle of your blood vessels, and whenever 5-HT2A receptor of the vascular smooth muscle gets activated, obviously it will produce vasoconstriction. Next, 5-HT2A receptor is also present in visceral smooth muscle, just such as your gastrointestinal tract, where it increases the contraction. It is also present in the visceral smooth muscle of your respiratory tract, where it increasing the bronchoconstriction. Even in the urinary system also, this 5-HT2A receptor is present, where it increases the contraction, it increases the activity. Apart from this, 5-HT2A receptor is also present in platelets, which is responsible for aggregation of platelets. Next, it is also present in cerebral neurons, especially prefrontal cortex, and activation of this receptor over here will cause activation of the cerebral neurons. So this is about 5-HT2A receptor. Next, coming to 5-HT2B receptor, not much is known, just we know that it is present in the gastric fundus of rat where it causes contraction. 5-HT2C receptor, it is also present in the blood vessel, vascular endothelium, and it elicits vasodilation through EDRF release, that is nitric oxide. Endothelium in the endothelium this nitric oxide is being released where it is responsible for vasodilation. So till now we knew that this serotonin causes vasoconstriction, but this is a different thing. 5-HT2C receptor is responsible for vasodilation because of release of EDRF, that is endothelium dependent relaxing factor, which is nothing but nitric oxide, because of which vasodilation can be taking place. So never you make it in your mind that serotonin will cause only vasoconstriction. No, 5-HT2C receptor, when it gets activated, it will lead to vasodilation also. Another thing is about this 5-HT2C receptor is it is also present in the choroid plexus, and where it expresses regulation of CSF formation. Okay, so obviously we know from the choroid plexus only this cerebrospinal fluid is getting synthesized, and we have got a role of 5-HT2C receptor over here. So this is about all the three subtypes of 5-HT2 receptor. Next, 5-HT2A receptor, where you have heard about this receptor. Whenever this 5-HT2A receptor has been blocked, it has got antipsychotic action. So most of the antipsychotics, they mainly act by mechanism of blocking of 5-HT2A receptor. But whenever serotonin binds with this 5-HT2A receptor, it will get activated, and obviously it will produce a different action. So 5-HT2A receptor agonists are used as psychedelics such as LSD. LSD is nothing but lysergic acid diethylamine. It is a kind of hallucinogen. It will produce hallucination. So if we block 5-HT2A receptor, it is used as antipsychotics. But when this receptor gets activated, it will start producing psychosis. The drugs that produces psychosis also known as psychedelics, also known as hallucinogens. Okay, so 5-HT2A receptor activation will produce psychosis kind of condition, and if we block this 5-HT2A receptor, they are used as antipsychotics. Next, 5-HT2A2C receptor antagonists, which are nothing but your antipsychotics, or you can say atypical antipsychotics such as clozapine or olanzapine, so on and so forth. So these drugs have got a side effects of weight gain. Okay, so whenever we are antagonizing 5-HT2A2C receptor, it is ending up in weight gain. So what scientists thought, if we are antagonizing this receptor, there is a weight gain. What will happen if we activate this receptor? So scientists produced a 5-HT2A2C receptor agonist, and they ended up with a result of weight loss. So whenever we are activating 5-HT2A2C receptor, it is producing weight loss. So we have got a drug lorcaserin, which is 5-HT2A2C receptor agonist, and can be used for producing weight loss, means it can be used in the treatment of obesity. So next we'll go to 5-HT3 receptors. So this 5-HT3 receptor, it is a neuronal serotonin receptor, and as we know, it is a kind of ion channel type of serotogenic receptor. Next, it is present in the somatic and autonomic nerve endings, and it is responsible for pain, itch, coronary chemoreflex such as bradycardia, fall in blood pressure due to withdrawal of sympathetic tone, respiratory stimulation or apnea elicited by stimulation of receptors in the coronary bed, and other visceral reflexes. Okay, so 5-HT3 receptor, when it is present in the somatic and autonomic nerve ending, it is responsible for generation of reflexes. Like as we know, like for example, coronary chemoreflex we take, and we know that whenever there is fall in the heart rate, that is when bradycardia occurs, the baroreceptor will get activated, and the reason behind this activation of baroreceptor is nothing but this 5-HT3 receptor. So it is mainly acting as a reflex. Next, nerve ending in myenteric plexus causes augmentation of peristalsis, even emetic reflex. Okay, so myenteric plexus is nothing but the neurons present in your gastrointestinal tract, and here 5-HT3 receptor is present, and it is responsible for two things. First one is peristalsis, and second one is emetic reflex. Next, area prostrema and nucleus tractus solitarius in the brainstem will lead to nausea and vomiting. Little bit we'll check out regarding this third thing. In the brainstem, more appropriately you can say in the medulla oblongata. So suppose this is a section, a cut piece of your medulla oblongata. On the medulla oblongata we have got vomiting centers. Few other structures of medulla oblongata is this. This is nucleus tractus solitarius. This is area postrema, and on the area postrema we have got chemoreceptor trigger zone. So here we are on the chemoreceptor trigger zone, we can find various receptors binding sites such as 5-HT3 receptor, H1 receptor, G2 receptor, even muscarinic receptors are, these all are the receptors present on the CTZ. Okay, even nucleus tractus solitarius have got 5-HT3 receptor. Now we are since we are talking about serotonin 5-HT3 receptor, we will concentrate in that only. So whenever this serotonin binds with the 5-HT3 receptor of CTZ, that is chemoreceptor trigger zone, then what will happen? It will cause activation of this chemoreceptor trigger zone, which in turn causes activation of area postrema. Activation of area postrema will cause activation of nucleus tractus solitarius, which in turn will cause activation of the vomiting centers. Okay, so when vomiting centers will get activated, then what will happen? Obviously vomiting will be taking place. So whenever 5-HT3 receptor present on the CTZ as well as on the NTS, that is nucleus tractus solitarius, wherever 5-HT3 receptor is present, either on the chemoreceptor trigger zone or in the nucleus tractus solitarius, whenever it will get activated, it will cause activation of vomiting centers, and because of which vomiting will be taking place. So how can we reduce vomiting? Yes, we can reduce vomiting by blocking this 5-HT3 receptor on both CTZ as well as on the nucleus tractus solitarius area. So we have got drugs such as ondansetron, granisetron, palanosetron, tropisetron. So these drugs can be used as anti-emetic agent. So it is mainly used in the treatment of chemoreceptor triggered vomiting or radiotherapy induced vomitings. For these vomitings we can use these cetrons, which are nothing but 5-HT3 receptor antagonist. So this is about the 5-HT3 receptor. Next we will move to 5-HT4 receptor. So regarding 5-HT4 receptor, we know that it is mainly present in the gastrointestinal tract. So this receptor has been demonstrated in the mucosa, plexus and smooth muscle of the gut, probably involved in augmenting intestinal secretion and peristalsis. So 5-HT4 agonist can be used as prokinetics. Prokinetics means these are the agents that increases the motility of the gastrointestinal tract. So we have got certain 5-HT4 agonists such as cisapride, mosapride and ranzapride. So these drugs are usually used as prokinetics, means it increases the peristaltic movement of the gastrointestinal tract, and these drugs are mainly indicated in GERD, gastroesophageal reflux disease. In this problem, these prokinetics, that is 5-HT4 antagonists, are being indicated. So this is about 5-HT4 receptor. And as I have told you previously, we have got 7 receptors plus 14 subtypes of receptor, but only the first 4 serotogenic receptors information we have. Not much studies have been done on 5HT5, 5HT6 and 5HT7 receptors. So we'll study this receptor till 4, means 5HT4 receptor only, till 5HT4 receptor only we'll study. So now next we'll sum up all the actions mediated by the serotogenic receptors. So suppose this is your brain, and in the brain we have got a serotogenic neuron, and this neuronal end nerve ending will have got a vesicle containing serotonin. This is 5-HT1A receptor. When serotonin binds with 5-HT1A receptor, it will activate it. Even we have got 5-HT1A receptor agonist, that is buspirone, and whenever 5-HT1A receptor gets activated, it have got anxiolytic action, or you can say anti-anxiety action. Next we have got 5-HT1B1D receptor. Serotonin binds with it, cause activation, and what will happen? Yes, it will treat migraine. Similarly, we have got drugs such as triptans, even ergot alkaloids. They also act by binding with 5-HT1B1D receptor and treat migraine. Next, we have got a reuptake mechanism also, and certain antidepressant drugs will block this reuptake mechanism and will treat depression. See, we know serotonin is a neurotransmitter which is responsible for happiness. So we need to release the serotonin. If too much of reuptake takes place, means it will go to depression. So many antidepressant drugs mainly act by inhibiting the reuptake of this serotonin. Next we have got 5-HT2A receptor, and we know if we activate this 5-HT2A receptor, means whenever serotonin acts or binds with the 5-HT2A receptor and activate it, what will happen? Yes, it will lead to psychosis. So we have got psychedelics such as lysergic acid diethylamine, which also activate 5-HT2A receptor and produces hallucinations. Next we have got 5-HT3 receptor, and when serotonin binds with 5-HT3 receptor and activate it, then what will happen? Yes, vomiting happens. So we have got certain antiemetics such as ondansetron that acts by blocking this 5-HT3 receptors. Next, suppose this is your blood vessel, and if we take a section of this blood vessel, it will look somewhat like this. This is the visceral smooth muscle. These blue balls are nothing but platelets, and inside these platelets is your serotonin. Now we have got 5-HT2A and 5-HT2C receptors present inside your blood vessels. When serotonin binds with 5-HT2A receptor, it will produce vasoconstriction. Serotonin when binds with 5-HT2C receptor, it will cause release of endothelium dependent relaxing factor, which is nothing but nitric oxide. And we know what nitric oxide will do. Yes, it will produce vasodilation. So this is the role of the serotogenic receptor on the blood vessel. Next, suppose this is your gastrointestinal tract, and if we take a cut section of intestine, it is look somewhat like this. This is the visceral smooth muscle, and of this of the lining of the intestine, if we zoom up this thing, we'll see the enterochromaffin cells, and these enterochromaffin cells contains your serotonin. Next, these are the neurons, the enteric neurons, and these neurons contains the receptor, that is 5-HT4 receptor. So whenever the serotonin present in the enterochromaffin cells binds with the 5-HT4 receptor, or else we have got a agonist of 5-HT4 receptor, that is C-substrate, it acts as a prokinetics, means it increases the motility of the gastrointestinal tract. So this was about all the receptors as well as their action summarized for the serotonin. Next we'll check out 5-HT antagonists. So the very first serotonin antagonist is cyproheptadine. It is primarily 5-HT2A receptor blocker, and it has additional H1 antihistaminic, anticholinergic and sedative properties. Now since it is blocking H1 histaminic receptor also, so it has got actions like other antihistaminics. It has been used in allergies and is a good antipruritic, but the anti 5-HT action has no role in these conditions. Okay, so cyproheptadine can be used in the treatment of allergies, but when it is treating allergy, it has got no role of blockage of serotonin. The allergy is the anti-allergic action is because of blockage of histamine receptor. Next, it increases appetite and has been used in children and poor eaters to promote weight gain. Lastly, the anti-5-HT activity of cyproheptadine has been utilized in controlling intestinal manifestations of carcinoid and gastrectomy dumping syndromes, as well as in antagonizing priapism or orgasmic delay caused by 5-HT uptake inhibitors like fluoxetine and trazodone. So this is about cyproheptadine, and as you can see, it has got anticholinergic action also. So it can produce side effects such as dry mouth, and it is producing sedative action. Sedative action is mainly because of H1 blockage action. So side effects you can assume like drowsiness or confusion, so on and so forth. Now next drug is ketanserin. It has selective 5-HT2 receptor blocking property. Among 5-HT2 receptors, blockage of 5-HT2A is stronger than 5-HT2C blockage. Now we know 5-HT2A, 5-HT2C, where it is present. Yes, we find these two receptors on the blood vessels. 5-HT2A is also present in the vascular and visceral smooth muscles, platelets, so on and so forth. But when we compare 5-HT2A and 2C, it is present in the blood vessels. 5-HT2A responsible for vasoconstriction. 5-HT2C receptor is responsible for EDRF mediated vasodilation. Now blockage of 5-HT2A is more as compared to 5-HT2C, means vasoconstriction action might be compromised. Anyways, we'll check out 5-HT induced vasoconstriction, platelet aggregation and contraction of airway smooth muscles are antagonized. Okay. It has additional weak alpha 1, H1 and dopaminergic blocking activities also. Ketanserin is an effective antihypertensive, but alpha 1 adrenergic blockage appears to be causative rather than 5-HT2A blockage. So this is about ketanserin. Our next antagonist is clozapine. In addition to being a dopaminergic antagonist that is weaker than the typical neuroleptics, this atypical antagonist or antipsychotic is a 5-HT2A2C receptor blocker. Clozapine may also exert inverse agonist activity at cerebral 5-HT2A2C receptors, which may account for its efficacy in resistant cases of schizophrenia. Our next antagonist is risperidone. This atypical antipsychotic is a combined 5-HT2A plus dopamine D2 antagonist similar to clozapine. Next drug is ondansetron. It is a prototype of the new class of selective 5-HT3 antagonists that have shown remarkable efficacy in controlling nausea and vomiting following administration of highly emetic anti-cancer drugs and radiotherapy. So these are few serotonin antagonists, and this was all about this video regarding serotonin. I hope you people found this video helpful. Thank you for watching.